It was the kind of heat that climbs inside your clothes and sits on your spine. Late July, 7:42 p.m., the sky going copper behind a row of telephone poles. I was driving west with the AC fighting the air like a tired boxer when the highway lit up with brake lights. A wreck up ahead had traffic backing for miles. Google Maps drew a red vein across the interstate and suggested a pale county road that cut south, then west, then north, looping around the mess like thread through a torn seam. I took it because that's what I do. I take back roads when they're offered. I like the feeling of being the only person for miles. Half a mile in, the pavement thinned to chip seal, then dust. The air smelled like baked creosote and old hay. Grasshoppers hopped like thrown pennies. I watched the map dot slide toward a place labeled Pine Hollow, a gray smear barely bigger than the font. I remember thinking the name sounded gentle, almost cozy, like something you'd see inside an antique store on a piece of driftwood, hand-painted in mint green cursive. At 8:06 p.m., I passed the old highway sign, Pine Hollow, Pop. 112. Someone had shot the 1, left just the 12. The road dipped. The temperature readout on the dash went from 99 to 95, and the smell changed to something cool and damp, like wet basements and old books. It felt wrong for July. A plume of swallows turned over a silo with no roof. Beyond that, houses, 3 of them, sat close to the road with shallow porches and iron chairs facing nothing. The 4th house was a general store if you believed the faded lettering on the window. Groceries. Ice. Film. Soda. A bell hung inside the door. The door was already open. I pulled over without planning to. I told myself I was stretching my legs. The air was 10 degrees cooler. My windshield fogged on the outside. I wiped it with the side of my hand and looked down the street. The town ran maybe 6 blocks before it ended in a cluster of pecans. A dog bowl sat by the store's door with rainwater in it. There hadn't been rain for a week anywhere else. "Hello?" I said when the bell clinked against empty air. I stepped in. The light was thin and gray, like the world had been washed but not dried. A radio sat on the counter, the kind with a cracked plastic dial and a missing knob. It played a murmur of voices too low to make out. Shelves held cans with labels gone pale, names you don't see anymore. Pear halves in tall serif. Tomatoes whole. Coffee vacuum-packed. The floorboards flexed under my boots but didn't creak, as if they didn't want to be heard. "Be right with you," a voice said from the back, and there was the sliding sound of a stool and someone clearing their throat. The voice had the molasses drag of an older man who had spent a life talking only when necessary. I turned toward the swinging door behind the counter, the one with the round window at eye height. I saw a shape move through it. A shoulder, the curve of a forearm. And the radio swallowed the words, and then the bell at the front door rang again, sharply, and no one had touched it. I looked back. The street was empty. The iron chair on the porch across the way rocked once. I felt that other cool smell rise, a breath from a cellar. I said hello, again, just to keep my voice in the world. "Be right with you," the voice repeated, exactly the same intonation, like a tape loop. The radio whispered beneath it. I set my palm on the counter. The wood felt damp, like it had been wiped with a cloth and not dried. A fly traced manic circles and then landed on the cash. Register. One of those brass ones with filigree and little white numbers. Behind glass, and never moved again. The door behind, the counter swung and stopped. There was no one there. The impression of a person lingered in the way of an afterimage. If you've ever stared at a lamp and then looked away, and the lamp's shape is still on your eyes. I leaned forward and the whispering from the radio resolved into fragments. "Not on the maps anymore. We had 13 on Sunday, Ethan. You seen the dog? That last one was so normal it almost broke the spell." I smiled. "Hey, I heard you," I said, feeling ridiculous. "I'm just passing through. Do you even have..." I was going to say cold water, and then noticed a cooler behind the counter with 2 glass bottles in it. The bottles had no labels, just thick old soda glass with that greenish tinge. The cooler hummed a little. I reached across and opened it. The cold breathed out like a mouth. When I looked up, the street outside had shifted. It took my brain a second to understand how. The shadows had lengthened too quickly, slid into angles that didn't match the sun I'd left on the highway. The iron chair faced a different direction. There was a child's tricycle by the porch step that hadn't been there. It was wet, as if it had been left out in rain. A man's voice, clear this time, behind me. "You headed somewhere?" I turned so fast my shoulder hit the cooler lid. There was nobody at the door. The bell didn't swing. I said, "Yeah, detour. Just trying to get back to the main road." It felt dumb to keep talking. But if you've ever been alone in a place too quiet, you know the way you talk anyway, as if it's payment for using the air. The whispering radio said, "It doesn't stick to people who don't stay." I didn't like that. I grabbed one of the bottles and tried twisting the cap. It wasn't a twist cap, and I didn't see an opener. I set it down. My hands lingered on the glass because it was very cold, purgative cold, like holding snow. It made my palms ache, and I didn't want to let go. From the round window on the back door, just an inch of glass, something looked in. Not a face. Not anything like a face. It was the way a darkness looks when it has weight. I felt the air in my mouth go flat. I set the bottle back and said, "I'm sorry. I have to get going. Take the second right," the voice said. The first words not from the radio, but overhead. From the rafters, maybe. As if someone had climbed up above the ceiling and lay on their back to talk to me through the beams. Dust drifted like slow snow. "Second right and don't stop for the light." "What light?" I asked, and because the question makes you honest, I added, "Is there anyone here?" The bottle sweated on the counter. The radio clicked through static and caught a song halfway. A woman singing something about a yellow dress, then lost itself again. The bell at the front door rang as if someone had left in a hurry. I turned and heard my own boots on the boards, except I hadn't moved yet. I left anyway. I put the bottle down. I couldn't make myself put it back into the cooler. Outside, the town had put on another hour of evening. The porch shadows stretched like someone pulling taffy. I walked to my car. The dog bowl was dry now. My windshield was dry. I looked up the street toward the pecans. A single streetlight burned at the far end, not fully on, just an amber pulse like a lighthouse finding itself. I started the engine. The radio in my car didn't come on. I hadn't touched it. The screen lit with my map, but the dot didn't know where it was for a full 10 seconds. Searching, then pinning me somewhere blank. I pulled out, slow. The second right was a lane barely wider than my car. It led between two houses that leaned like tired men. Branches scraped both sides with a soft wooden sound. It took me behind the main street to a field where a road was not really a road, just two pale tracks through grass. The streetlight pulsed behind me now, brighter, slower, as if it were breathing and getting closer. I didn't look directly at it. I kept going until the grass turned into crushed shell, and the crushed shell turned into gravel, and the gravel pressed itself into tar. The air warmed. The smell changed back to hot creosote and dry dirt. My car radio came on with a burst. The same woman, the same line about the yellow dress, then switched to ads, then to my podcast, the one I'd been listening to an hour ago. The map found me on a road with no name and told me the highway was 5 minutes north. When I reached the interstate, traffic was moving again. Whatever wreck there had been was gone. I merged and drove and let the highway take my thinking. At 9:21 p.m., my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. No call, just the message. I didn't listen until I was home. It was 12 seconds of hum, and then my own voice saying clearly, "You're heading somewhere?" And then a second voice. My voice again, answering, "Yeah, detour. Just trying to get back to the main road." When it finished, the timestamp under it read 8:06 p.m., Pine Hollow, and the location showed no pins at all, just gray. I saved the bottle cap imprint on my palm until it faded. I don't know why. Maybe because there was never a bottle cap. Maybe because on some nights, when the AC cuts and the house breathes, I hear a bell ring and a chair rock and a woman singing like she's walking through a yellow dress to the end of a street she can't leave. I've never gone back. You shouldn't either. If you see the sign for Pine Hollow, and the one is gone, keep your eyes on the asphalt. Don't let the air change in your mouth. Don't stop for the light. My cousin Jess keeps keys to places. That's how she says it. Keys to places. Not buildings. Not rooms. Places. She works for a utility and has reason to open gates down roads that settle into themselves before they meet anyone. She moves through counties like a rumor. If you've ever driven a farm-to-market road and seen a chain gate with a lock that looks too heavy for its purpose, she has a key that fits it. In late May, just before that first real summer phalanx of heat stood up across the fields, she asked if I wanted to ride along. 2 substations, 1 tank farm, and a weird old meter standpipe by the Noe, she said. We'll be back before dark if we don't. Fall in love with a yard sale. We left at 10:20 a.m. with a cooler of water and a bag of oranges, and the kind of optimism you can only bring to a Friday when the week has left you alone for a minute. The day was beautiful, and I don't mean the kind that makes you write about clouds. I mean it made you pay your bills with a smile and thank your past self for buying sunscreen. We did the 2 substations. We did the tank farm. We didn't fall in love with a yard sale. We did eat oranges in the shade of a low-maintenance shed and made the kind of plans that are mostly lists of movies we haven't seen. The standpipe was last. It sat, according to the little map on Jess's clipboard, at the end of a private maintenance lane that left the county road, crossed a pasture, and slid down into the Noe's shoulder. The gate at the road had 2 locks in series, the state, the utility. Jess unlocked them both with that charming muscle memory grace of people who work with their hands. And we bumped along the lane while grasshoppers performed their kamikaze feats in front of the bumper. At the bottom of the slope, the lane straightened and ran under pecans. It ended in a clearing that felt like a room. The standpipe was there, a metal riser with a meter face so old the glass had ambered. Behind it, something else. Flat, squared, the rusted rib of what might once have been a pavilion. I didn't know that word yet for it. Pavilion. It would arrive later, carrying another word in its pocket. Bell. Jess? I said, because she had stopped in a way that meant her body recognized a place before her mind did. I used to come here with my mother, she said, which felt like a sentence that would go on into a story, but she didn't tell it yet. She cut the engine. The quiet arrived like a friend who doesn't knock. The river's sound stitched the edges. We walked to the standpipe. The meter read, well, I couldn't tell you. The numbers were bled, the rolling digits in a half position like someone had interrupted them mid-turn. Jess knelt to photograph it for the records. I wandered to the rusted ribs and put my hand on one, still warm from sun. The metal made a tiny sound under my palm, the way metal does when memory shakes it a little. You okay? Jess asked without looking up. Fine, I said, and then, without deciding to, added, Do you remember a town here? Her head lifted. My mother talked about a square, she said. We came down sometimes when I was small. She'd bring bread. She'd say we're feeding the town even if it doesn't have mouths anymore. I didn't know what she meant until I was older, and I still don't know. A bell rang. It was so soft that my first thought wasn't bell. It was metal spoken to by another metal. It occurred maybe 10 feet behind me, and then 60 feet in front, and then from above. All in careful succession like someone checking channels. Jess stood. Something like a light moved at the far edge of the clearing, more a suggestion of color than illumination. The air got cool enough to turn my skin into a field of tiny animals finding shelter. I'm not here to stay, Jess said, and I realized she was addressing the clearing, which felt appropriate and like good manners. I'm here to read the meter. The light moved toward us without revealing a source. The bell answered itself. This part is difficult. If you've never been in a place that is arranging itself around you without needing your permission, you won't understand the intense politeness of it. Nothing in that clearing wanted to frighten us. It just wanted our agreement. Jess, I said, and she put her hand on my elbow, grounding me in the specific electricity of her palm. I have a key, she said, and it sounded like a claim and a joke and a prayer. We didn't turn to go. We didn't move at all. The clearing did it for us. The pecans adjusted their angles. The ground recalibrated its slant. The river moderated its sentence. Without our bodies shifting, we were pointed toward the lane. The light folded itself and tucked into the trees. The bell made a sound like someone giving up the last word. We walked backward 3 steps. That's how it felt. We were walking forward, but the air decided to frame it as retreat and we let it. Because you make deals with places constantly, you just don't say it out loud. At the car, Jess put her hand on the hood and said, "Thank you for the morning." It felt dumb to hear, and exactly right. On the county road with the gate closed, Jess said, "My mother," and then stopped. She drove another 100 yards and tried again. She went to a homecoming in a town nobody could find. They rang a bell to tell the river to mind itself, and the river took it wrong, and the town learned to be quiet for a while. That's not how rivers work, I said. Gentle as possible. I'm telling you what she told me when I was 7 and had grass stains on both knees, she said. I think she got a lot of things wrong, and I think she got one thing right. There are places you talk to, and places you listen to. We stopped at a diner and ate late lunch. The waitress had a bell tattoo on her wrist, the delicate linework kind that looks like it would ring if the skin got cold. When she filled our water, the tiny bell shook in the picture, and I looked for the trick. There wasn't one. Jess raised an eyebrow and didn't mention it. We ate pie and laughed about nothing in the low-pressure way you laugh when a morning has put a shape on you that you don't have language for yet. At home, I put my keys in a bowl. They chimed too long. When I woke at 3:11 a.m., the house felt like it had been rearranged for a party that was scheduled for a different night. I walked to the kitchen and found a bottle cap on the counter that wasn't mine. And then ow, scratched. Under my hand, the glass of the window clouded with a breath that was mine and not mine. And all I could think was of Jess, saying, I have a key. We still ride along sometimes. We skipped the lane to the standpipe now. Not because we drew a rule against it, but because the truck decides to be heavy when we float the idea. The work orders show the meter has been read. I don't ask who read it. If you ask Jess, she'll tell you she doesn't go to homecomings. She goes to abandonments to leave things behind on purpose. If you ask me, I'll tell you there's a bell that tries a note in my house once a week, checking my willingness to agree. I don't count the rings. I count the seconds after. The long, generous quiet the sound leaves behind. That's the part I think the town wants. Not the staying. The listening. You can listen a long time before you notice how far you've walked without hearing your own steps. If you hear dogs discussing terms, if you see a light without a source, if you find your voice answering itself in a stairwell, be impolite. Interrupt. Turn a key you didn't know you were carrying and walk out through the neat square in the fence that other people left for you. Don't stop for the light. Don't catalog the bell. And if you arrive home and a bottle cap waits on your counter with letters half gone, put it somewhere you'll forget it. Some places vanish to keep you gentle. You don't have to make louder what learned to be quiet.